So I've made some updates to our connection files here with the procedural connection. So I just did, if there's no link, then it's just going to die and output the error information. And I've commented out that query that we initially created here because this is the one we're going to work with, and we're going to actually start creating something within these databases. And of course now within the last lessons we've created a whole ton of databases here, so now we're going to start to utilize them. And the way to utilize your database is to start creating tables, because tables are the ones that hold the data. So you've got, in a typical database, you've got bunch of rows, bunch of columns. So the rows are for each individual entry and the columns are for the table, and that's where you deposit and hold that information. So let's go back to our code, and I've also done the same thing for the con2. So I've done, if there's a link, if it's got a connect error, then it's going to die as well and output that link connect error so that we can take a look at that. So this way we know if there are any issues with that connection. So what we want to do now is actually create a brand new table, and this table is what's going to actually hold that information into our database. So we're going to do it through a query, and just going to show you how this works here. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to create test table, give it 4 columns there, and this does take some getting used to, but essentially with every database you need to have something that's unique in order to identify it. So usually I use integer. With integers you need to set a length. So I'm going to set a length of 11 characters within this. This will give me a really big number to work with. And I'm going to check off this AI to make it auto increment. And you also need to have one as a primary index. So here I can select that out as well and just hit OK. And maybe we're going to make, so we'll do something like a company. And so this is where we want to maybe hold a company name or something. So variable character, and you can go up to 255 on the variable characters. So you don't have to check anything else off here. So this is just a typical, so maybe we'll do something for size here. So this is going to be a number again, and just going to put a number of 5, and maybe lastly we'll just put contact or something like that. And then we're going to use variable characters again here. And with these, so you do have some options here to null. You can not null it as well. So that could make sure that each row must contain a value. You can also, here you can set up those default values. So under our attributes here, we've got the ability to do binary, unsigned. So this uses, it's used for number types, the unsigned. Essentially it limits the stored data to positive numbers. We've also got some comments here. If I do null here, I've got my option here to set it as primary unique index. And primary key is the one that's important here. And this is used to uniquely identify the particular column. That this is going to be the one that this is going to be unique, and this is how we can identify it. And that's why we just put ID there. The auto increment. So this allows us to automatically increment it as well. So now let's just go ahead and save this. And the really neat thing here with the PHP is that we can really easily create these tables. I've got some options here. I can do a relational view as well. And also, if I want to get the code for that table, I could just do an export on it. It does have that button, and I could do custom, and here I'm just going to output and do a quick one. View output as text. I can also select the rows, so if it was contained value I could select various rows to hold in there, and I'm just going to leave all of this stuff as default. So essentially this gives me the query in order to create a brand new table. So I could just go back out here to SQL and I can create a table, and I'm just going to create this as table A, and go ahead and we'll see that we automatically can create a table with that query information. So if we bring that into our code, and now we're going to take a closer look at this query information here and take a look at how we can create a table. So it's going to be just as we did before, where we did the query. And notice that we need to quote around it so that brings it into a string that we can utilize within our code. So the query is going to be this create table, and we do need to specify the database name that we want to connect to. So we can do that over here within that connection. So let's take a look at our settings, and we're going to be doing it in the my data database. So I'm going to just do one more DB, and just going to double check. I believe we did call it name. Yeah, it's been called name. So now this will make a connection to this specific database, so database name, and this is where it's going to initialize and run that query into. So down here, all we need to do, just as before, we just need to run that query, and we link it over to that connection, and let's see what happens. So let's go back out to con1 and see if this works out. So of course we should have something there that we're creating, so I'm going to add that in, but let's just quickly take a look at the my data. Just refresh this, and we see that we did create that table indeed there. So it is visible there, and we do have access, and it is formatted exactly as the previous one, where we've got an ID, and the structure is the same way as we had created it initially. So let's just take a quick look through and update the code, because this way we're not really seeing that we're creating this table. And we're also, there's a few things that are missing here as well, that we've just got the not null here. So we're missing that auto increment. So I need to add that in as well. So auto increment, and we did want to set this as primary key. And also we need to make it unsigned so that it is a positive number. And I'm just going to take a quick look at this, and it looks correct there. So now when we run through, we're going to create a brand new table. We'll just call it test area. And over here is where I want to check to make sure that we do that connection. So I can just do a conditional statement here to see if we do make the connection, because just as that PDO, it does return a value. So it's either a 1 or a 0, so it's a Boolean value. So if we get return value of 1, we can write out created table. And if we don't get that return value of 1, I'm going to write something and maybe put a sad face there. So let's try this out again, and we'll see what happens now. So this time we've actually got all that settings there for the primary key, the auto increment, and everything, and we get something went wrong. So let's take a look and see what's happened here. So when I refresh it, we see that we didn't create that table. So let's take a look in our code and see what's happened here. I believe the error here is that this unsigned needs to be first. So it does matter what order we're defining it, and we do want to specify that it's unsigned. So this integer value is going to be a positive value. It's going to auto increment, and we're going to set it as the primary key. So let's try this out again. So we've got test area, go back out here and refresh it, And now when we take a look at this, we should have our brand new table there. So we've got test area there. And let's take a look at the structure, and we see that now this time we do have that auto increment set. We've got this attributes unsigned, and it is set as the primary key. And we'll take a look at the table that we had created manually as well, and we see that it does match there, that we've got the auto increment on there, we've got it as primary, and this time we didn't set it here as unsigned, but the settings are the same here. So in the next lesson, we're going to show you how to start adding in data into this table and start working with this table, pulling back information, and so on using PHP. So that's all coming up in the next set of lessons.